Loved ones and friends, I'd ask we all try to gather in our seats as we look towards welcoming in our sacred ceremony.
Esahenai eleharim me'ayin yavo ezri Esahenai eleharim me'ayin Yavo Ezri Me'im Adonai Ose Shamayim Varetz Ezri Me'im Adonai Shamayim va'aretz.
Esayenai el harim me'ayin yavo ezri. As we lift our eyes to the mountains and the heavens above, we take refuge in the loftiest of heights with God. And so it is also too true of Carl, who lifted up us in life. Our world is a better place because of the kindness, the wisdom, the devotion that Carl brought to all of our lives. As an attorney, he was relied upon by his clients and colleagues constantly for his wisdom and his good counsel. There is never a person who had a bad word, truly, to say about Carl, which is a remarkable accomplishment for a person invested so much with positions of leadership in a profession noted for those who have strongly held opinions, often diverging from one another. As a family man, despite his steadfast attention to his duties in leadership and an attorney, he was an ever-present beacon of light, shining his light with dependability, integrity, and an abundance of love. To his children, it was like winning the lottery. As a Jew, he was united in his service with God and the Jewish people, practicing his faith, serving in faith not only with the support and direction and purpose towards Judaism, but also towards humankind, to our community of Solel, to our community of Hollywood, to our community of South Florida. He literally preserved the canopy of solace and strength and support and shalom of our holy abode. We will miss him greatly. Our friends, we gather together in a darkened world. Sandy, his beloved wife of 62 years. Father to Stephen, Richard, Yvette, his wife, Deborah, his husband, William. A loving grandfather to Jared, Jack, Jordan, Mandy, Brandon, and Jane. In our tears, we feel loneliness. In our sorrow, we ask that we seek this presence of the ever-loving, supportive love of faith of God, especially in this sacred space which meant so much to Carl. For Carl's love that united all of us in life and which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of his memory. For the gifts of his heart and his mind and his soul that brought us joy and happiness. It is a precious remembrance that we will keep with us, not only now, but in the days and we know the years ahead. For Carl's life, which was such a blessing, we give thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of sacred scriptures that bring us the ever-new presence of God's nearness. It teaches us of our kinship with our Creator, in light and in darkness, in joy and in sorrow. Adonai ro'eh lo echsar, binot desha yarbitseni, almem menuchat yen haleni, nafshi yoshovev, yen chnei baglei tzedek l'man shemo, gam ki elech bag maglei tzalmavet lo irara, ki ata imadi, shivtecha bishantecha hema yenachumumi, taroch l'fanai shulchan neged tzorari, dishanta v'shemen orsi, kosi ravaya, Achtov v'chesed yifuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti b'veit Adonai l'orech yamim. Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our prayers from Ecclesiastes invite us to consider how time can be used in this world, how we experience the days of our lives as a mixture of pleasure and pain, wholeness and brokenness, life and death. At times such as these, with our sense of grief, our emotions ebb and flow, and so we seek to use our time well with sacredness, to find ourselves supported in the sacred places of our lives, the sanctuaries of our life, of our sacred experiences, and the sanctuaries of our homes, embraced always in those sacred times, we pray with friends and family, and strengthened by the sacredness of our ancient tradition. For everything there is a season, a time for every experience under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember Carl. In the blowing of the wind in the season of winter, we'll remember him. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we'll remember Carl. In the rustling of leaves and the beauty of autumn, we'll remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we'll remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we'll remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we'll remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we'll remember him. So long as we live, so too shall he live. At our seasons where we give gratitude to God for the light of our life on Hanukkah, on Shabbat, on our sacred moments and sacred occasions. For all these moments and so many more, in that light we know it continues to burn within us, for he will always be a part of us, as we will always remember him. There's a prayer I often read at the funeral, which is not from the sacred tradition, and it speaks of life's journey. To this I will like to add that was remarkable, I think, of Carl's life as he made through the twists and turns, the journeys of life. He always did so guided by a pearl of wisdom in the Talmud, which says, there are three things that are especially beloved by God as we make our journey in life: he who is forbearing, he who is temperate, and he who is always courteous. I can't think of a better way of acknowledging and giving gratitude to God for how Carl made his journey in life and how he was guided in that journey by being a gift to God. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, and often back again. From health to sickness, and back we pray to health again. From offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a journey of sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death, to life everlasting. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi shem Adonai mavrach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. Let us take a few moments of silent prayer and reflection as we honor the life of Carl Schuster.
My dear friends, no person occupies just one space during his or her brief time on this earth. Everyone who thinks and breathes and laughs and cries and wakes and sleeps, who lives and ultimately dies, embodies the infinity of our human history. Every man who is blessed with a wonderful family perpetuates his dreams and hopes, his sense of right and wrong, his warmth and his humility through every member of his family, through his wife and children and grandchildren. Every man who cares about another, who lends a helping hand, who sheds a tear of love or loss, who shares in a moment of life, who drinks deeply from the cup of human existence, its joys and woes, that man has created his own immortality. Such a man was our beloved Carl Schuster, whom we remember today. Each one of us in this sanctuary possesses so many precious and poignant memories of Carl. He was giving and caring and kind. He touched all of our lives with meaning and has left us a living legacy of love. Carl was exceedingly intelligent. He was a leader in the legal community. He was a brilliant leader in this temple, having served as its president. And when my late wife Penny and I would attend events that honored Carl, and there were many of them in Broward County, towards the end of an outstanding message he delivered, he would speak of his wonderful wife, Sandy, and tears would begin to roll down his cheeks every time he began to speak about her and the strength and love that she gave him and the warmth and companionship that filled their relationship. All of us knew that the tears would begin to flow, not only from Carl's eyes, but from our eyes as well. At their beautiful home a few days ago, Sandy showed me the Jurisprudence Award that Carl received from the Anti-Defamation League. It was inscribed with the words that perfectly described him as a person possessing high ethical standards, a socially responsible man of outstanding character. That was our Carl. In all the years that I knew him, which was about 50 years, I never heard him say an unkind word about anyone. Even in times of challenge at temple board meetings, Carl remained as a symbol of stability and dignity. Born in Cincinnati, Carl was 2 years old when his parents moved to Fort Lauderdale. He attended Fort Lauderdale High School. When he became a bar mitzvah, like every other bar mitzvah in Hollywood and Fort Lauderdale, Carl got his bar mitzvah suit at Sterling's clothing store in the old, not modern, downtown Fort Lauderdale. He became a bar mitzvah at Temple Sinai when it was located on Johnson Street. Carl attended, ultimately, Ohio State for 1 year, and then the University of Miami. Carl's parents owned a department store in Fort Lauderdale. Carl helped them out there and worked at A.S. Beck's Shoes in Miami. His late brother Bernard owned a drugstore, or what was then called a chemist shop, on Las Olas. It was Rabbi David Shapiro, Sinai's rabbi at the time, whom I treasured as a dear colleague over 50 years ago. It was David Shapiro who married Carl and Sandy. And after all, they met at Temple Sinai at a young singles group get-together. They each had dates with someone else. Following the event, they began to date each other. Carl met Sandy's mom and dad and eventually asked for Sandy's hand in marriage. Things were different then. Sandy and Carl began dating when they were 19 years old. They were married on June 14th, 1959, at the Seville Hotel on Miami Beach. They went to St. Thomas and San Juan on their honeymoon, and as the rabbi said, they were married for 62 years. To earn a living for the two of them, when they first got married, Sandy worked as a medical technician for a doctor in Bay Harbor Islands. And Carl began his law career at Rudin McCloskey, where he was earning, at that time, something like $15 a week, whereas Sandy was earning $50 a week as the primary breadwinner. Finally, their income increased, and Carl and Sandy were able to build a home in Hollywood Hills in 1963. In 1964, their oldest son, Stephen, was adopted when he was 3 days old. On December 16, 1967, Deborah was adopted when she was 4 days old. And on December 21st, 1970, Richard was adopted when he was 17 days old. And a beautiful family was created. Carl became ultimately a major partner in Rudin McCloskey. Carl and Sandy became founders of this temple. And I was blessed to officiate at their children's bar mitzvahs and Deborah's bat mitzvah. Each Schuster kid had the same Torah portion for their bar bat mitzvah, miketz, which happens to have been this past week's Torah portion during Hanukkah. In her early years in Solel, Deborah, with her beautiful singing voice, sang in the Solel Singers, our children's choir. She was an aide, a teacher's assistant to my wife Penny's second grade class. Sandy's and Carl's son Stephen has told me that he was lucky, blessed, and grateful to be Sandy and Carl's son. Carl was his Cub Scout leader of Den 181. Stephen thoroughly enjoyed family vacations. He has described his dad to me as true and honest, a goat of dads, the greatest of all time. Saturday morning breakfast was a special time to connect and catch up. Stephen remembers their Tuesday night dinners together, horseback riding as a kid, vacations in Gatlinburg, playing in a creek. He remembers his dad's honesty. Stephen feels that the world's a lesser place because his dad is gone. Stephen, your dad enriched our world by being here. Without him, your accomplishments may have never taken place. And Carl and Sandy were blessed with their grandchildren, Jared, Jackie, Jordan, Amanda, Mandy, and Brandon. Carl made Judaism and the temple primary and essential in their family life. He treasured his Judaism and lived it. I always believed that he was a Lamed Vavnik, one of the 36 righteous men in each generation. Carl received numerous awards during his lifetime for community service, and because he was a true mensch, a gentleman in every sense of the word, that's why he was given so many awards. But one of his most valued awards, perhaps his most valued, was the Legacy Award from the JDRF, the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, for his 22 years of tireless effort to eradicate type 1 diabetes. Carl was 55 when he was diagnosed with diabetes. And Carl also received awards for promoting diversity in his law firm before it was a thing to do. I have so many personal fond memories of sharing in experiences with Carl and Sandy. It was always Carl and Sandy, and it will remain that way, as Carl will forever be in your thoughts and your actions, my dear Sandy. Every few years, in the many glorious years of Temple Solel, we would have a family retreat. 50 or 60 of us would go to a resort in South Florida or the Keys and spend a Shabbat, a Sabbath there for an entire weekend. I remember jogging with Carl on an early Saturday morning. He was fast and steady. I was doing the best I could to keep up with him. Little did I know then that in his early years he was a marathon man. I also remember when one night on a retreat, our entertainment was to present a program fashioned after the TV show To Tell the Truth. Only one of us on the panel was telling the truth. We each had a variety of happenings to describe. When it was my turn to fabricate a lie, Carl declared that I was telling the truth. Why do you think so? Everyone asked, including myself. He answered, my rabbi would never tell a lie. Boy, did that pump me up. I'll never forget our wonderful temple trip to Israel. Carl, Sandy, and the kids were among the 50 or so people who went on that pilgrimage. At Masada, on a blazing hot summer day in the desert in July, Carl and I challenged Richard, or maybe it was the other way around. We challenged him to a race up the mountain. Richard won, but we came in second. I also remember when we were staying in the Sonesta Beach Hotel on the Egyptian border in Eilat, and I seem to remember Sandy shouting at her son Richard to stop climbing a hill that would bring him into Egyptian territory. Sandy was 300 yards from him, shouting, "You're not going into Egypt." And finally, Richard turned around and came down. But I must admit, some of us male adults during the evening tiptoed over the line that separated that hotel from the land of Egypt. We felt we just experienced Passover in reverse, having gone from Israel to Egypt and then returning to the Promised Land. And by the way, that hotel is now in Egypt. Carl never reprimanded his children except twice. When they were playing in flooded streets in Hollywood, he was going to spank them, but Stephen turned that around by reinforcing the seat of his pants with padding, and all Carl could do was laugh. His kids loved to go fishing with their dad off the Dania Pier, and then out to lunch at Jack's Diner. They loved to go to dolphin, marlin, and heat games with Carl. It was a treat to go to the old Orange Bowl, or what followed, which was, and in my mind still is, Joe Robbie Stadium. Carl went to Game 6 when the Marlins won their first World Series. He attended the Dolphins' Super Bowl loss in 1985 when Dan Marino was our new quarterback. To those of you who may not know, Carl and I were very distant cousins. It was Carl and my son Dan who drew up my retirement agreement with Temple Solel. A little bit of nepotism never hurts. It was Carl, as president of the Temple, who presented Penny and me upon my retirement at a beautiful dinner in the Temple with a check to have a wonderful cruise. Carl was one of the most kind and gentle men I have ever met. No one that I know has ever said a bad word about him. His word was his bond. He was not judgmental. He was always very supportive of his children. His son Stephen is a warm and wonderful soul. Richard is the assistant golf pro at the Emerald Hills Country Club. And Deborah is one of my favorite kids who grew up in this temple, and she knows it. She and her husband, Billy, live in a rural area on a farm where they're able to hold concerts, and Deborah organizes and participates in them, and I personally think that would be a wonderful experience for our Temple Youth Group to hold a retreat there, which Deborah and I have discussed. Richard has his anchor in time, and that is his lovely wife, Yvette. On December 1, 2011, Carl's law firm became part of Greenspoon Motter. Carl had been a partner at Reuben McCluskey for 25 years. Those with whom he worked, and many of you are here, who have described him as a stalwart, compassionate, kind, loving friend and colleague, selfless, sweet, expressing a legacy of promoting the highest ethical standards, a mentor to law partners, a man who would make a constant effort to do things correctly. That is what you, his colleagues, and all of us have thought of Carl. We weep today because we have lost a dear and precious friend who cannot be replaced. Bruce Gwillan was his law partner for 50 years, and he has told me how much he learned from Carl. When Carl became ill, he felt he was letting his clients down. By being sick. In his illness, he would still visit his clients, this man who lived loyalty. My friends, in this hour, all of us share in many emotions, grief and loss and loneliness and fear. We also share in praise. Praise to God for the gift of life, for all the minutes and moments and days and years we shared with Carl Schuster. when I visited with Carl in the hospital a couple of days before he passed away. I shook his hand, and his grip was still strong, as it always was. He wanted to be home so badly, and he went home. And I believe that God ultimately called him home. Carl, if our love could just have saved you, you never would have died. In life, we loved you dearly. In death, we love you still. In our hearts, you hold a place that no one else can fill. It broke our hearts to lose you, but you didn't go alone. For a part of us went with you the day God called you home. We shall miss Carl. He was one of a kind, a living sermon. We shall miss a man who brought meaning to each day, whether with a stranger or a friend. He shall remain an eternal inspiration to each one of us. For you see, a man like Carl Schuster can never die. For love exists. Where love exists, death has no dominion. Through his faith, we have more faith. Through his courage, we have more strength. Through his heart, we have more love. And through his deeds, we share in a greater shalom, a greater peace. Such a man was Carl Schuster. And now God has another angel. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the righteous soul of Carl Schuster always be remembered for a blessing. Amen.
I just came to learn that Carl's 3 children had their bar and bat mitzvahs not only connected through being in the same sacred space and the same sacred bima, but literally in the same parsha. And our holidays don't always occur shared with the same parsha, but yet the holiday of Hanukkah almost always, with very rare exception, is complemented with the Parsha of Miketz. And so I think every father for whom I've ever officiated a bar or bar mitzvah for, as they look at that moment, they hope and pray that their children not only relish in that moment, in the love and the support and the accomplishment, but also that they take it with them in their lives, that they carry forward in their lives. And with all of Carl's many accomplishments, and there are many in this world, his greatest accomplishment was that in a non-judgmental, loving, and always supportive way, he was there for his kids. He helped to nurture and cultivate their very disparate gifts and talents. And with his pride and joy, it's my honor to call forward one of his children, Deborah, to share some words with us.
First of all, I have to say how extraordinarily humbled Dad would have been seeing you all here today, coming to honor him. He would be crying at the outpouring of love and saying, those of you who came from far away shouldn't have gone through the trouble. and he would have sincerely thanked everyone for coming. So on behalf of my dad and mom and Stephen and Richard and I, thank you so much for being here and supporting us. It means the world to us, and it's truly a testament to who he was. There are people here from every place in his life that he touched, from his family and friends to the office, to Joe DiMaggio and the Memorial Foundations, and the people active in JDRF and his friends from Temple. Dad immersed himself in everything he did. He didn't do anything part way. He worked up to and up until he passed, and he was expecting to be going back to work. He the week before he passed, I was helping him send out invoices from home. I kid you not. I kid you not. Aside from all the wonderful things that we did together as a family, going to football games, and Daddy coached us in baseball and softball and t-ball, and we just had such wonderful memories with Dad. He taught us a great pride of country. He was in the Army, and I didn't realize till I went through one of his folders yesterday, because his records are immaculate. I don't know if you know about my dad, but everything has a folder. So I went through his Army records and found out that he was a reservist until 1972, when he was honorably discharged. And he used to take us to the armory, and we would go and watch. They called them the River Rats at the Riverside Academy up on Hollywood Boulevard, doing their formations and their march on the weekend mornings, and we'd go to the Air and Sea Show. So he gave us a great pride and love of our country. And let me tell you that Rich and Steve and I, at different parts in our lives, we were trouble. We all had our issues in one way or the other, and Dad was, as the rabbis were saying, he was very supportive and non-judgmental, and because you never wanted Dad to say that he was disappointed in you, because that would have been the worst thing. And he just always helped us and lifted us up through whatever it was that we were going through, him and Mom. And his love for my mother, it just was ceaseless. And it is ceaseless. And he'll always be with you, Mommy. He'll always be with you, with his arms around you, holding you up. So know that. And it didn't matter who you were in this world, if you came in contact with my father, no matter what your station was in life, he treated you with respect and compassion. He just was so kind to everyone that he met. I got a very rare perspective of my father that a lot of kids don't get, and that was working at the office. Through all of my trials, I'd always land at Rudin, working in office services in the mailroom and reception, and sometimes even a secretarial assistant. And everybody would come up to me and say, "I love your dad so much. He's not like working for someone else. He's like working for family. He is the kindest man. I just love him. I don't want to work for anybody else." In fact, Bruce said, long before anything was ever in the works, "If your father is ever not managing partner at Rudin, I won't be working with them anymore." and that was the truth. That was what happened. So I used to call him, because he was such a good, honest, and humble man, I used to call him Honest Carl. And he didn't like that, because he never saw himself that way. He never saw himself for the good, for the pure soul that he was. And so the way that I finally straightened myself out through my life is I started asking myself, what would Carl do? And that was my mantra. If I ever, and my husband Billy said the same thing, what would Carl do? If I was at a crossroads and didn't know which way to turn, it was always, what would Carl do? So if you ever find yourself thinking in life, what should I do? Ask yourself, what would Carl do? And you'll know that it's the right choice. Thank you again for being here. Daddy, we love you so much. Your kids and your grandkids and your wife and your friends and your family all love you so much, and we'll take you in our hearts with us wherever we go. And when you think of Daddy, please pick up the phone and call Mom and just say, "Hi, Sandy, I'm thinking about you." Thank you so much.
That was lovely.
You're my favorite too.
Sandy was striving to find a single word to capture Carl. I can't remember who mentioned it. I think it might have been Deborah. Somebody said the word pure. She said, that was Carl. He was pure. Hanukkah, of course, is the holiday of oil. And the reason we use oil is because it symbolizes that consecration of pureness in our life. Something that's a miracle in our lives to have, just like Carl. And when you think of the tears that often would flow from Carl's eyes, I think it was because of that purity of heart. He didn't live with a veil that sheltered him from life. He was present. He was loving. He was there for us. And so as our tears flow in sorrow, may they also be joined by an overflowing river of love and devotion and shalom. I ask all assembled to please rise. As we continue in our concluding prayer of El Maleh, compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Carl Schuster, who has entered into eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May his memory always be a blessing, and may he rest in peace. And together we offer. Amen.
אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע, מזהירים את נשמת קלמן בן יוסף ופרייד הרייזל שהלך לעולמו. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו. וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the services here at Temple Solel for Carl Schuster. The interment will take place at Beth David Memorial Gardens here in Hollywood at 3201 North 72nd Avenue. Before we continue, I want to announce when coming to the family's home for Shiva, they ask that you please bring a mask, wear the mask, unless briefly when you're eating something for the meal of condolences. So we ask you to please bring a mask. Again, the interment will take place at Beth David Memorial Gardens in Hollywood at 3201 North 72nd Avenue. There will be a police escort escorting the procession to the cemetery. If you are going to the cemetery, we ask you, when you go to your cars, turn your high beam headlights on along with your flashers. Okay, so this way the escorts know you're going to the cemetery. And when you leave the sanctuary, in the lobby we have these orange placards. Please put them on your dashboard on the right side. Okay? The procession, when we leave the parking lot, is going to, the escorts will block traffic. We're going to cross eastbound traffic and go to that traffic light and then proceed westbound on Sheridan Street. At this time, I'm going to ask members of the family to please come forward and act as an honorary pallbearer. Bruce and Richard will direct you. Bruce, Jared, Jackie, TJ, Mandy, Jade, and David. Ladies and gentlemen, once the family has passed down the center aisle, those of you who are, please follow behind the family. Again, if you're going to the cemetery, wherever your cars are, here in the parking lot across the street, please go directly to your cars and turn your high beam headlights on. And again, the procession will form on Sheridan Street going west. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You can't say enough. Thank you, those of you who are here in the sanctuary. Thank you for being here for the family. Those of you who are on Zoom, again, virtually, we're sad that you're not here physically. I'm sure you'll reach out to the family in the coming days. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
I'm going to do the Shiva tomorrow if you want.
Thank you.